Okay, it looks like we just have a couple people on here still. Oh, okay. Looks like somebody's in the waiting room. Let me admit her. Okay, there we go. Okay, so now we've got a few participants. Just kind of waiting for a couple more to get on there before I get started. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get started, and then hopefully some more people will join us. I'm Deborah Jeffries with Appraisal Care, and we're going to be talking about how to choose comps and do a CMA prep from the appraiser's point of view. So one thing that might be helpful for you guys is I've created a Facebook group for real estate agents called Appraisal Answers for Real Estate Agents. And in this group, you can go and ask any questions that you have. And, I will get back to you as soon as I can. And it's just, we can help share information and so that we can all do our jobs better. There's also, I've put in there sample rebuttal letters for you in case you get a poor quality appraisal. And there's all kinds of information too about, I get a lot of, there's a lot of frequent questions I get over and over. And so I will, post things in there regarding that, like, where do the smoke alarms go in the house, and where, how many carbon monoxide alarms do we need, and all that. So those kind of questions come up on a regular basis. So I will, when they come up, then I go ahead and post the information. Or if it's just, if I'm working on a particular job and something comes up on the job that I think might be helpful for you guys, I post that in there too. So we got another attendee here. Okay, so that's something that you can join, and you'll be able to, after, anytime after this class, ask me any questions too that might have come up that you weren't able to get answered. I am going to leave some time open at the end for some questions and answers. So, all right, let's move on to the next slide. So the reason why I started teaching this class is I started noticing that a lot of lenders were like, just really relaxing appraisal guidelines. They're waiving appraisals and trying to use modified type appraisals where they're like minimal information, or they're using, multiple parties to do the different portions of the appraisal. Like one person do the inspection that's not even licensed and then have, a licensed appraiser finish the job. So, their thinking is that, or this is their excuse for doing all this, is that they, wanted to speed up the loan process. They wanted to save the borrower money, and, they're claiming there's a shortage of appraisers. Well, it really has not sped up the loan process at all, because what's happened, and it's not saving the borrower money, because what's happened is a lot of these appraisal management companies are actually charging more now for appraisals, and they're shopping around. They're wasting a lot of time shopping around for the cheapest appraiser. So then by the time they find the cheapest appraiser, there's very little time to get the job done. So, we're just seeing really poor quality appraisals out there because of this. And not all appraisal management companies are like that. I do work for a couple that they're very fair. I mean, I believe that the way they charge is they just charge like $100 on each appraisal instead of a percentage, where we've seen that because some appraisal management companies in other states have to disclose how much they're paying the appraiser. I have heard appraisers saying, they only got $250 or $300, yet the appraisal fee was $1,000. So the management company is pocketing all the rest. And that's just really not fair, because doing appraisals is a lot of work. It's a lot of responsibility and liability. So, and you're not going to get good quality appraisers that are going to be willing to work for that cheap and that fast. So anyways, I'm just letting you know why, my concerns out there, and why I felt there's a need for us all to kind of work together on this kind of stuff. So here's the type of things that they're, the type of appraisals they're doing. They're either, doing a waiver. During COVID-19, they've also created these flexibilities where the appraiser can do a virtual inspection using photos that the homeowner takes themselves. I mean, in my opinion, this is very risky, because there's so much you can miss by someone else taking the photos and you not actually being there. So the other thing is these hybrid appraisals, and this is where they do use, like, they can use somebody that's non-licensed to do the inspection, and then the appraiser only gets paid about $50 to $75 to finish it, and they have all the liability. So those, I believe those are not going to continue to happen, because I don't think they're panning out the way, the way lenders thought they would. Like I said, I think they thought it was going to save money. It was going to speed up the process. Well, the more parties you have involved, the longer it's going to take. There's just communication problems. And it actually, us appraisers have found that it's taking us longer to do appraisals where we didn't actually do the inspection, because we have so many questions. So it's just much better if we do the job from start to finish. And then they've also got these appraisal valuation models. Okay, those have been around for a while, and usually they only use those on people that have really good credit, a lot of equity, but they're not very accurate at all. And I've actually had some borrowers hire me that their lender has used an AVM, and the value came in so low and they knew it wasn't right. So their lender did allow them to get an appraisal, and they were able to select their own appraiser. And so they selected me because I was in the immediate area, and they knew that I knew the neighborhood. So there's a lot of potentials. A lot of issues with these types of appraisals, and I already mentioned some of it. You can just imagine, some of the other issues that could come up. So let me just go to the next screen. So one thing that people don't really realize a lot of times either is that the appraisal really only protects the client who ordered the appraisal and who pays for the appraisal. So if a lender orders an appraisal and they pay the appraiser, really it's only for their use. And even though someone else may get a copy of the appraisal, it's really, they can't use it for other purposes and then try to go back to the appraiser and, claim, try to use it in court or whatever. It's really just for the lender's use. And we can't share it with anybody but the lender either. So unless the lender gives us permission. So one thing I was learning from my E&O insurance company, which also was another reason why I, between what my E&O insurance company was reporting about lawsuits, and I'm also an expert witness, and I've been hired by real estate agents many times to, represent them in court as an expert witness. And, that's why I want to teach you guys this stuff, because I'd rather have you guys, having an appraisal done right from the start so that you don't have to end up in court. You can spend your time selling real estate and not in court defending yourself. So, most of the claims come from purchasers. It's like buyer's remorse or whatever. And it's mostly because of inflated values. And then some do sue for low values. And I have represented some people regarding that. And then the statute of limitations is really tricky, because they can actually sue you. The statute of limitations starts after they realize there's an error. So this could be many years down the road that somebody can come back and try to sue you. So that really concerned me. Okay, and so also the most common error, according to my E&O insurance company, is square footage claims. So there are a lot of real estate agents that hire me to measure the properties before they even put it on the market, because we do see a lot of discrepancies between what the tax records are showing the property is and what the homeowner thinks it is. And, or you might see different square footages and different MLS listings over the history of the property. So it's kind of hard to, determine exactly what is going on there without having an independent third party come and, measure that, so that you can properly disclose, what the square footage should be or what it is. And so it is very costly to defend yourself in court. And you may not be at fault at all, but you still have to defend yourself. And so a lot of people just run out of money, and they end up having to settle because they don't have the money to keep on fighting in court. So, that's kind of a bummer, because especially if you weren't at fault at all, and then you have to, just pay to make the thing go away, is just, and so I'm all about prevention. I would rather have everything be done right in the beginning so that no one has to go there. So now, talking about how I pick my comparable sales, these are some things that we would consider is, we want something similar in style, similar in living area for sure, with a similar bedroom and bath count, similar age. Age is not quite as important if a property is extensively remodeled. So there's times when I, don't even make an age adjustment, and there could be quite a difference in age. And because the condition is so similar, I sometimes will not make the age adjustment. You also want to make sure you are using comps in a similar market area. Like if you don't have any in your immediate neighborhood, make sure you're comparing it to a comparable neighborhood somewhere else. And then lot size, that can be really important, especially if it's a really small lot or a really large lot. And the reason why amenities are the least important is because that can be changed. Okay, but we can't change the style. I mean, I guess we could change the style of the home. It could be expensive depending on what style it is. But we can't really change the age of the home, or, we could change the size, but as it is now, if I'm appraising a property, it is what it is. And, but you can't change your location. Locations can also change over time though, actually. All this stuff can change. I've actually seen some condos in Long Beach down some of the high-rise condo buildings. some of their views are being blocked now by some new buildings going up. And so the prices are decreasing on some of those. And also there's just so many condos down there now. I've seen that the values are sometimes slipping a little bit in value lately. So, you know, there are things that can change your location to make it better or worse. So you have to kind of keep that in mind when you're looking at views and stuff like that. You know, like when I see a newly constructed high-rise building going up that's going to block the view, you know, this is important for me to know that there's a high-rise building, you know, being planned to be built that may be blocking the condo's view that I'm appraising, you know, then I really need to consider that. So here's the Fannie Mae guidelines. Basically, they want, you know, our comps should be similar physically and legally. And we do need to check on the zoning for that to see what can legally be built there. That's really important because we always want to make sure that we have comps with a similar zoning. And we typically will only give value for what can legally be put on that property. For conventional, which is Fannie Mae, and I'll get into some other, we'll talk about FHA a little bit more later, but for the most part, we need to try to, as an appraiser, we try to find out what is legal on that property. So if we've got some unpermitted additions, we may have to handle those differently. We may either give no value if we can tell where the addition starts and ends, or we may just give a minimal value for it if we can find. But the thing is, we have to find other comps that have that unpermitted addition or garage conversion, whatever it is, to prove that there is market acceptance for that. So living area is probably the first thing you want to start with is finding things that are the most similar in size and condition also. But I always just start with living area when I start my search. That's the first thing I'm going to start with. And I don't want to, I can narrow down my search if I get too many. Let's say my only criteria is gross living area in a certain area. Maybe I draw the map boundaries of where I want to pull the comps. I may just start out with gross living area, and if I get too many comps, then I will start fine-tuning my search by adding other things like bedroom. Like let's say it's a 2-bedroom, and I really want to focus on 2 bedrooms. I might just put 2-bedroom in my search criteria, but I don't. Sometimes you can miss 2-bedroom comps by doing that. So you have to search a lot of different ways, because sometimes in the MLS, it'll say it's a 3-bedroom, but you find out it's really 2 bedrooms with a den or something like that. And so you don't want to miss any comps by only pulling 2 bedrooms. But in my initial search, I probably wouldn't put bedrooms, but if I didn't find enough 2 bedrooms, then I would probably try to narrow it down to what 2 bedrooms are even out there. All right, and you want to make sure it's, you know, they're competitive comps. Is it something that the buyer, is it something similar that a similar buyer would consider, you know, and is the neighborhood similar? If there are times when we cannot, we may not be able to stick to all the guidelines that, you know, like the Fannie Mae guidelines, there's also lender guidelines. If we can't follow these guidelines, we just have to explain why. So here is more like lender guidelines. These are typical lender guidelines, but guidelines can also be different. Lenders have overlay guidelines. So it's important for the appraiser to be familiar with the lender so that they know what to do in certain situations. So typically they like to see your comps within a mile. They like to see at least 2 sales within 90 days that close. And they want to see, active and pending sales. Pending is definitely going to be preferable, especially right now in this market where the prices are going up really quickly. We really need to see what's going on with those pending sales. And so, I've actually been spending a lot of time on the phone lately, focusing on those pending sales and calling agents, trying to find out what they're in escrow for, when they're going to close, because we're finding that, the closed sales are behind where the current market is right now. And so, it's in some cases, it's necessary for us to do positive time adjustments too. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. When it comes to, if you're in a project, let's say it's a gated project or a condo project, a lot of times they would want at least 2 sales in the project and 1 outside. So maybe our first 2 comps would be inside the project. Our third one would be outside. And then comp 4, 5, and 6 could be, whatever else we need to support our value. Sometimes there aren't 2 sales in the complex that are recent enough. And so we wouldn't be able to do that. And we would just explain that then. But I would definitely go back in time and see if there's no sales in the complex. I would go back and find out when was the last time one sold and what did it sell for. And I would, take that into consideration. You always want to try to find comps. If you've got it, let's say you're pricing something with a pool, you've got to try to find a comp with a pool. You've got to try to, if you have a guest house, you've got to find something with a guest house, unpermitted addition, all the different features they have. I try to pick up, comps that have, where I have everything covered that the subject has, And so sometimes I don't always pick the best. Sometimes I have to use comps that are not the best comps, but it's because they have this certain feature. So I may put less weight on it because, there's other things that are not as similar about it, or maybe it's an older sale, but it had this feature and I'm just trying to, throw something in there that had a similar feature. So a lot of times they want us to have, at least, 1 comp with a similar bedroom and room count. I mean, you want to have as many comps as possible with a similar bedroom count, but some of them even want, some of these lenders even want the same room count. So if you've got, let's say you've got a living room and a family room and 4 bedrooms. So altogether that would be 7 rooms that the property has, because you've got a kitchen, you've got the living room, the family room, and then 4 bedrooms. So that's 7 rooms altogether. So you'd want to try to find something else that also has 7 rooms. So, and yeah, these aren't as important. The lender guidelines, sometimes we have a little more leeway in not following all of those as long as we explain. The Fannie Mae guidelines, it can be difficult to get around those. Something newer that has been, we've been having to take into consideration as appraisers is the state rent control. Because this has a potential to impact all properties that we appraise, anything from 1 to 4 units. So what we need to do is we're having to get a lot more information about the current tenants. If we're appraising something that is tenant occupied, we need to find out how long the tenants have been there, when was the last price increase, and we need to figure out how does the current rents that the property is getting impact the value, because we see a lot of properties where the current rents are below market rent. And now with rent control, you can only increase it by so much. And so we have to try to figure out, well, how long would it take for this property's rent to catch up with what the market rent really is? So we, basically what we have to do is find other comps that have similar market rents or lower market rents. Let's say if we have one that's particularly low or particularly high, we want to make sure we try to find comps that are similar to that. And it's not always easy. So anyways, that's just something that we have to analyze. How does this impact the value, this rent control? So it's important to understand the guidelines of the rent control and what, and you know, how often can they increase the rent, what percentage can they increase it, and all that. So here's another thing that lenders like to see. They like us to bracket our different things in the report. So for instance, we have a property here that it's sold at $399. And so, you know, I've got 3 comps here, one sold below what mine is selling for, and we've got 2 that are selling above. So the lenders just want to make sure that theirs isn't the highest priced one out there, or the lowest priced one. You know, if it is, they'll want to know, they want an explanation. Why is that? So, you know, also lot size, we try to bracket that. It's not always possible to bracket all these different things, but, you know, we do the best we can. And, you know, the more that we can do this, the, you know, the more solid the appraisal is as far as the lender is concerned. So I circled, you know, the areas that we typically, that they kind of hone in as far as the bracketing. So hopefully that will be helpful in choosing your comps. Okay, so one thing that I see come up a lot is that I think a lot of agents use price per square foot, and we do not even look at the price per square foot because we have to look at all the individual parts of the property and adjust for those. You could have 2 properties with the same similar price per square footage that are just completely different properties. They're just, it's like comparing apples to oranges. So we don't really focus on the price per square footage at all. So just wanted to let you guys know about that, so that, you know, because I have so many agents come to me and say, well, these comps, you know, support the price per square footage, but I'm appraising, let's say I'm appraising a 5,000 square foot home, and they've given me comps that are 1,000 square feet that have the same price per square footage in that neighborhood, because the home that I'm appraising is overbuilt for the neighborhood. And they're thinking, oh, I got to get comps from this neighborhood that, you know, show a similar price per square footage, but I can't compare a 1,000 square foot home to a 5,000 square foot home. So, you know, I'm going to have to go farther out to get my comps. Sometimes lenders, though, will want us to use some comps. I actually had this one lender, they actually preferred, even if the square footage was extremely different, they wanted to see what was selling in that neighborhood. So if I had a home that was overbuilt for the area, and I was having to get my comps in other neighborhoods, they would want something in that neighborhood. They want to see something in that neighborhood to see, you know, what really is selling there and how overbuilt is this property. Okay, so here's an example of, you know, I was just trying to show here that, you know, you can have 2 completely different properties that have same price per square footage, but their sales prices are completely different. One sold for $755, one sold for $920. They are completely, I think one has a pool. Let me see here. Well, they're built in different time periods. So this one is a Spanish style, built in 1928, and this is more of a traditional looking home. So, you know, just completely, oh yeah, and this one does have the pool. So, you know, these are 2 different properties that a particular buyer may not consider. Like, let's say they're looking for a pool home, they may not consider this. Or let's say they're looking for a Spanish style home, they may not even consider a home like this. So anyways, I'm just trying to show you how that can work with the price per square footage and how it doesn't really make sense as far as appraisers go. All right, so talking about, you know, getting comps in other neighborhoods, you've got to make sure they're comparable. So, you know, typically lenders will not like us to go over man-made barriers like freeways, or even this river here. They may not want us to cross that, but there's times when we have to do that. So, like for instance, if I'm appraising here in this area right here, sometimes I have to use comps over here. And they're pretty comparable areas. There's even a neighborhood over here that it has similar type homes to ones down here. And so there are times where I will cross the freeway. And, you know, but if I have plenty of comps in my immediate area, then there's no need to cross the freeway. Okay, but it's just, we would only want to do that if there's a shortage of comps. So let's see. And then up here, you can see that there's no barriers in between these areas. I circled this area because this area is Virginia Country Club, and it tends to go for a lot more money because they're typically larger lot sizes and larger homes. And it's near a golf course. Whereas over here, it's kind of, there's all kinds of, you know, different size homes and lot sizes, and it can really vary over here. So, I mean, there are times where I may use a comp over here if I'm appraising over here, but I try not to. And same with if I'm appraising over here, I'm going to try not to go over here if possible. And to, you know, to try to figure that out, what you can do is, let's see, I think there's a slide. Basically, it can become very obvious if a neighborhood is not comparable. If you can just look at the average prices in the neighborhood, it can start becoming really obvious that a certain neighborhood is selling for way more. So like if you look at, I've got 3 different areas here: Wrigley area, Bixby Knolls. No, I've got 2 areas here. Okay, so you can see that in Bixby Knolls, the minimum price is $375, maximum $2,750,000. In Wrigley area, it goes from $280 to $725. And the average is $564. Over here, the average is $772. So it's pretty obvious that these are, you know, different neighborhoods. And so if you can't find enough comps in the neighborhood too, I mean, there's times where I've gone back 3 years in time to get a comp. And then what I do is I figure out what the median prices have done between when that comp sold and when I'm doing the appraisal. And then I make time adjustments from there. And it's additional support for the appraisal. And it's been very helpful for some really unique properties that I've appraised. There's times where I have to, you know, I will even have to go out of a city and get comps in a neighboring city. Sometimes a property is located, it's bordering the neighboring city. It's just right across the border. And so sometimes there will be more similar homes across the border in the other city than there is in its own city. Because maybe, let's say a builder, you know, built 2 different, you know, they built similar homes in the 2 different cities nearby each other. So that is something that you can consider. You wouldn't want to get all your comps in another city, but if you had to get 1 or 2, you know, that would be okay. Let's see, what was back here? Okay, so as far as homes, you want to pick the homes that are closest in proximity, obviously. The closer in proximity, the better if they are similar and if they're built around the same time. Same school district is, that's, you know, some people that is important to, and some people it's not. So it's not, we don't have to pick all our comps. All our comps do not have to be in the same school district. We want to make sure we have some in the same school district, but there's times when it's a really unique property that we may have to go to another school district to get a comp in order to, you know, find something that has a certain feature that ours has, like a guest house or whatever it is that we're trying to find, or maybe a similar location, like on a busy street or something like that. So when you're looking at a property and you're trying to figure out the value, you need to look at what's the most important feature of this property. Okay, if it's on the waterfront, that's going to be the most important feature, right? So we're going to want to try to find comps that are waterfront. If it's got a certain view, we want to make sure we focus on ones that have that certain view. Special school district, there are some that are definitely in more demand than others. Having a traffic noise, we want to make sure we find ones with traffic noise for sure. And we may not find one that has the exact same location, but we can find something that might be similar. Like, let's say ours is on our side's a busy road, and maybe we find one that backs to a busy road or is near the freeway, just something. We want to find something with a similar amount of traffic noise. So the style, sometimes we always want to try to make sure we have something, at least one comp with a similar style, right? But in some neighborhoods, that's not always easy. So you may have to go to another neighborhood to find something with a similar style, or another city, or you may just have to use something that would be a comparable style. So another reason why I might have to go out of the city is if it's a new construction. If you're in an older area, like in Long Beach, it's most of the homes were built a long time ago. And so let's say there's a new infill construction project, that has a small amount of homes being built, and I've got to appraise that. It may be hard for me to find something that's new construction also. So I may have to go outside the city for that, or just across town for it. Historical properties, I actually specialize in those. I live in a historical neighborhood. And with those, some historical neighborhoods, the comps are plentiful. Others, they're very small historical district. And so you may not find any comps in that historical district. So you may have to look in another historical district to see, what's selling there. Because the advantage of some of these historical districts is, they can qualify for that Mills Act and get reduced taxes. So we have to consider that when we're doing a property in a historical neighborhood. Also, the quality is going to be different. An older property is going to have, typically it's going to have a lot more character than, unless somebody's gone in there and modernized it or something. But anyways, you want to try to find something that has similar historical features in it. And oh yeah, ADUs. Okay, so ADUs is something that I've been having a lot of questions. A lot of agents contact me about ADUs, and actually even borrowers and homeowners that are thinking about building them. I get a lot of calls about ADUs. The thing about ADUs is a lot of times appraisers don't give them very much value because there hasn't been a lot of comparables available that have a legal ADU. Most of the ADUs we see, they are just rumpus rooms that somebody converted without a permit. Okay, so, and we have to appraise it as what it legally is. So we have to appraise it as a rumpus room. So I've got to try to find a comp with a rumpus room. So that has been the problem with giving, people are paying like $100,000 to $200,000 to build these ADUs, and they're very disappointed when they see that they're only getting like $5,000 in value for this ADU, And I think a lot of it is because it's just so new and there's just not enough comps out there with legal ADUs, but it is starting to get easier. I did have one back in December in North Long Beach where the guy was building a brand new ADU, and it was fairly big. I think it was a 2-bedroom, 1-bath ADU. And, you know, to try to find another one with a newly constructed ADU was very hard. It was like looking for, it's like looking for a needle in a haystack when you're searching the MLS. So, you know, I had to go through the MLS with a fine-tooth comb. I also had to look at not only single family residences with ADUs, I had to look at duplexes. And what I found is usually we separate for a single family residence with an ADU, ideally we would like to appraise, only put the square footage of the main house in the appraisal, right? And we would put the ADU as a separate valuation. But the problem we're finding now is there's so many different size ADUs. And then the houses that have the ADUs are so many different sizes. So this one that I did in December, I couldn't find any comps that were, you know, exactly the same size as this one's main house and its ADU. So what I had to do is combine the square footage of the main house and the ADU and put, and that's how I had to compare the property to other properties that had a combined square footage that was similar. Okay. But it's really important that you guys, when you in the MLS, we really do need to know though, how big the main house is and how big the ADU is, so that we can figure out how we're going to handle this situation. And how we can compare these different ADUs. We need to know if there's a big difference in size between the different ADUs in order to, you know, figure out what our adjustments should be. So it's a little complicated right now. I think it'll start getting easier as more and more people build the ADUs and more people convert them to legal ADUs. So we'll see what happens. But for right now, it's, you know, basically if you're going to build a brand new ADU, you know, I mean, it's going to take you a long time to recoup your to get that value back. Until more people start doing this. And so let's see.
Hi, Deborah. This is Yona. Could I ask you a question?
Sure.
Okay, so recently we made an appointment to see this meet this owner. So she does have a property in Gardena. So she does have an ADU, but it's not permitted. Her main house is about like 1,100 square footage. And then the back house is about, I would say like around 650, somewhere there, 600 to 700. So when we run comps, should we just look for a property that like based on the size of the main house, or because that the ADU is not permitted?
Yeah. Yeah. So just focus on the main house, but you do want to try to find a comp that has an unpermitted ADU like that. Okay. Because that way you can see, you know, did that add any value to it by having, you know, and also it shows the lender that there's market acceptance for having an unpermitted ADU.
And
so,
okay, sorry. So on the MLS, can we look for unpermitted ADU?
Yeah, you would have to try to, you know, go through the MLS and try to see if you can find. Usually what I'll do, if I've got an ADU, I do a wildcard search and I'll search it a lot of different ways. I'll search for the word ADU. I'll search for accessory dwelling unit. But a lot of times you're going to get comps that come up where the agent said potential for ADU.
Right.
So, so it can be very time consuming trying to find one with an ADU. Was this building that's the ADU on this property, was it ever permitted as anything, or is the whole thing unpermitted?
The whole back house is unpermitted, which according to the owner, when she bought this property, was already there.
Well, yeah, we hear that a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we, you know, that's, people always say that, well, it was here when I bought it, but that doesn't mean, you know, anything. So, Yeah, so I mean, sometimes they're permitted as other uses, like I said, like a rumpus room, and so then we can give it value as a rumpus room. But yeah, if it's not permitted at all, the appraiser may not give it any value, because the thing is, we don't know what it's going to take to permit that, or the city may just make them tear it down. So we don't want to give value for something that might actually, it might actually cost more to tear it down. You know, so we have to consider that too. So yeah, it's a little bit tricky when there's, like I said, you just want to make sure you find something else that has an unpermitted ADU, and then that helps a lot.
And I have like another story with the ADU. This time it was with a buyer. This property was also in Gardena, and it did have an ADU. However, according to the listing agent, it's not permitted. So it was really, really hard for us to, you know, make an offer, because like, you know, we wanted, the buyer was also concerned, like, you know, once he purchased this house, he might be told to, you know, knock it down if the city doesn't approve, right?
Right.
But then listing agent is like, okay, after they purchase it, go to the city and look for, I mean, apply for permit. However, like, you know, city might say, okay, this is not approved, and then they might ask them to tear it down, right? So it was really, really hard how to make an offer based on the condition.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. And some people have asked me, is it worth it to go ahead and get it permitted so that we can give value? And I mean, I would have to take that on a case by case basis to see if it is worth it. But you would basically, you know, need to find out from the city what it would take to, you know, get it permitted. But I think that they are being, I don't know, there's certain criteria. And so, and each city is going to be different too. That's the problem. So you have to know what is, what the requirements are for each city. And then there's also state laws. So we have to know, be familiar with all of those guidelines to figure out how we're going to handle that situation. So, you know, and a lot of times these ADUs are eliminating garages, you know, and so you have to consider, okay, what kind of impact is that going to have on the value? If this one now doesn't have a garage, we need to find something else that doesn't have a garage too. So it's making things a lot more complicated. Between the rent control I was mentioning earlier is complicated things, and then these ADUs have also complicated things a lot. And the thing is that these these are temporary things that the state has implemented, and they can reverse them at any time. You know, I think they're only for so many years, and then they can either decide to renew it, you know, or they can just say, no, we don't want to allow ADUs anymore because it's, you know, they find that it's impacting the parking situations too much in areas, or whatever it is, you know. Sometimes it's just temporary because at the time they need to create more, like right now, they just need to create more affordable housing, okay? But eventually they may cut it off because they don't want it to get, you know, to where, you know, it's just too high density everywhere. So, so that's something that could change later down the road. And that's why, you know, I think getting them permitted is important, because you'll always be able to give it value like that. But I mean, if you can find comps that don't have a permitted one, it just really depends on the area. I mean, so I would have to look and see what in, you know, what is typical in the area. And in the past, most of the time we've seen, most of the ADUs have been unpermitted, but it is changing, like I said. So every property is different, and so it can just be complicated. But I don't know if I answered your question. Did I answer your question?
Thank you so much, Deborah.
Okay, so okay, so another thing that we look at is the days on the market. I pull a listing history for every sale that I use in my report, because I want to see if something's been on the market for an unusually amount of time, like this 224 days here. Obviously, maybe that was priced too high, and that's why it didn't sell. Or maybe there was a difficult tenant in there. You know, sometimes I can't tell by, sometimes it's obvious to me why it was on the market so long if I see that there was a bunch of price reductions, and then it went into escrow right after the last price reduction, right? So then it's pretty obvious that, yeah, okay, it was listed too high. Sometimes though, it doesn't make any sense. And when I call the agent, you know, they'll say, well, it was a difficult tenant, and as soon as the tenant was out of there, it went into escrow. So sometimes, you know, I can't always figure it out. And so, you know, I may be giving you guys a call to find out, you know, what is the story? Because I might want to throw something out if it's a, you know, maybe there was a certain problem with the property that, you know, maybe it's not a good comp after all, and I might just have to throw that out. So basically, if I'm appraising a purchase and, you know, I look at how many days on the market that's been on the market, and then my comps should all be pretty similar days on the market from the time the last price reduction was to when it went into escrow. So, and then that's how we figure out like how long would it, the lender wants to know how, if we take this property back, how long is it going to take us to resell this property? Okay, so that's why we have to look at the days on the market and figure out for each property we appraise, how long do we think it's going to take to sell it if it's priced right. Let's see. So our sales all have to, whatever date I inspect the property or whatever date they tell me the value needs to be as of, because sometimes there are cases where I do appraisals where they need the value to be for, especially for tax purposes, they need to have the value be sometime back in time. So I always want to make sure that my closed sales sold on or prior to whatever that date is. Okay. And I can't really place, I've got to have something that's sold and actually closed that supports whatever value I'm coming in at. But I can also put some weight on the pending sales. If I know that, let's say I contact the agent and they tell me how much it sold for and it's going to close like tomorrow or next week, you know, then that's a really good comp. And I can explain that in my report that, and then that kind of shows where the direction that the market's going in, that it's obviously increasing. It gives me more support for doing positive time adjustments for some of my older sales in the report. So let's see. Now, sometimes though, what I've been noticing lately is that sometimes the listing prices and the pending sale prices are much lower than what they're actually selling for. And so that's why it's important for us to talk to the agents to find out, you know, are they all, you know, because if the list price is lower than what I'm appraising a property for, the lender's going to look at that and go, well, you know, it looks like the market is declining. Look at the listings available; they're lower. But if we can explain that, no, it's, you know, people are getting multiple offers in this market, and you know, they're selling. I mean, I've been seeing properties selling for 100 to 200,000 over list price in this market lately, and people are paying more than what they're appraising at because they're just so low inventory. So, you know, as long as we can explain all that, it just all needs to make sense. So it's really important for appraisers to verify information with agents. You know, not all of them do it. And unfortunately, like I mentioned before, you know, sometimes we're under like these ridiculous time constraints to get the appraisals done. So and then we also get graded on how, you know, on our work, like how did we turn it in late? Did they need to come back and ask us for revisions? They keep track of this. Some of the appraisal management companies keep track of it, and it can affect your ability to receive future assignments. So some appraisers, you know, may, like, to me, I'm not going to compromise my quality to try to meet a deadline. Okay. I don't care if I get a bad rating from that client or not. You know, I want to make sure the job gets done right. And I just make sure I communicate with the client and let them know what's going on so that everybody is aware. And so, you know, hopefully it won't affect my rating because, you know, something came up that had nothing to do with me. Sometimes we get to a property and there's a big surprise there at the property, something that nobody told us was there. You know, like you were saying, you know, an unpermitted ADU. You know, sometimes I get there and it wasn't in the MLS. There was no indication that this thing had this unpermitted building. So now, and I show up to the property with all my comps are already picked out and I don't have a comp that has an unpermitted ADU. So now I've got to get on my tablet and start searching for a comp that has an unpermitted ADU. Well, if I'm on a tight timeline, if I've got if I have back-to-back appointments that day, you know, I may not have time to do that, to look for another comp. So it's really important to not, you know, not have any surprises for the appraisers when they show up, to make sure that they're prepared and can get the job done, you know, right and on time. So let's see. I think we've already talked about a lot of this stuff. Okay, in this example, I was just trying to show how when I do pick out my comps, I'll usually start with, I usually don't pull my comps by area, first of all, because some agents put the wrong area or they don't know what area a property is in. Okay, so you might miss a really good comp. So I usually draw on the MLS, the map. I use the map and I draw the neighborhood boundaries that I want to search in. And because sometimes I might need to get a comp that's outside that particular neighborhood. And so I want to make sure that, you know, I draw my boundaries to where I know, if I'm familiar, that, oh yeah, over, you know, to the east, there's a similar neighborhood, you know, I want to make sure I draw my boundaries over there and include those. And I try to pull, like when I first start, I'll pull like 25%. I look at the square footage and I figure out what 25% below the size of the home I'm appraising is and what is 25% higher. And that's going to be my range. So right here, I had an 1,800 square foot home and my square footage range when I'm doing my search is going to be 1,350 to 2,250, which is 25% below and 25% above the square footage of the house I'm appraising. Now I might get too many comps doing that and I might have to reduce it to maybe 15%. But I always try to start with, and I might even have to increase it to more than 25% if it's a really unique property. But I usually start with 25% and then see what I get. And then as far as bedroom count, if let's say I'm appraising 3 bedrooms and up, a lot of times I'll just put 3+, because a lot of times we find discrepancies with bedrooms. You know, it'll say in the MLS that it's a 4-bedroom when it's really a 3-bedroom. You know, we see all kinds of discrepancies, and until we, you know, compare the MLS with the tax records and, you know, possibly interview agents and look at all the MLS records, sometimes we don't know how many bedrooms it really has until we do all that work. So we don't want to miss any good comps. But like if I had a 2-bedroom, I would probably start out with just doing a square footage range and don't put any bedrooms at all. See what comes up, see if I find any 2-bedrooms. And if I don't, then I may just take the square footage off. Don't put any square footage in my search criteria and just put 2 bedrooms and see what comes up. And that way I can see where do I have to go to get these 2-bedroom comps, and figure it out from there. But sometimes, you know, when you've got a 2-bedroom, I don't like to just put 2 bedrooms in my search criteria and only search for 2-bedroom, because again, there's discrepancies. Sometimes in the MLS, it'll say it's a 3-bedroom when technically it's really a 2-bedroom with a den or something like that. So yeah, after I do this basic search, then I start really fine tuning, okay, which ones have which one's back a busy road like mine does. So that's one reason I like the map too. I like looking at them on the map in the MLS so that I can try to hone in on the ones that have some kind of traffic noise like mine does. And then I might, let's say mine's completely remote, or it has a kitchen and bath remodel, and I'm going to want to try to find comps with those features. Okay. So here's an example too. I was talking earlier about these two neighborhoods, how they can really sell for different prices. And this is just another example of, you can see that, I pulled a particular square footage range, and this is what I got over here. And this is what I got over here. So over here, that square footage range is going from 833 to 995. And over here, it's only going from 500,000 to 660. So obviously these are two different price ranges. And we would want to avoid, trying to use comps in the other area. In that case, try to get most of our comps. And, if I was appraising here, I want to get most of my comps here. If I'm appraising here, I want to get most of my comps here. Let's see. Okay, so here I was just talking about the days on market again. I already pretty much talked about that, about, just digging further to find out why something is on the market so long, because that might not be a good comp. If it took that long to sell, maybe it could be an outlier. So we may have to throw it out, just depending on what we find when we dig further into that. So yeah, we want to find out too if there's any, if any of those comps are distress sales. Maybe they sold low because it was a distress. If I find, if something really stands out, if one of my comps really stands out as being, selling much higher than typical or much lower, I'll call the agent and try to find out, what was it about this property that, made it sell higher or lower. Sometimes it's just all timing. I mean, sometimes at the time, the values were in a certain price range, like this is what we're seeing right now. And then the prices start quickly going up. And so ones that were listed on the market prior to the market increasing in value so quickly, they're going to sell lower. And so those comps may not be as good as ones that we can find that, just closed. So there's been a couple of appraisals I've done recently where I had to, turn the appraisal in like a day later than the lender wanted it, because I was waiting for this closing information for a comp that just sold. That was my best comp because it was more in the price range of what's happening now, not what was happening a couple months ago. So, when we have a recession though, and, like the last recession we had a lot of short sales. And, in the beginning, if you just have a few short sales here and there, one here and there, we can probably throw those out if they look like they sold below market value. They don't always sell below market value, but if it's pretty obvious it did, we'd want to throw that out. But when there starts becoming an abundance of short sales, that becomes the market. And so that we would not be throwing out short sale comps because sometimes that's all there is to choose from, and so it really just depends on what's going on at the time in the market. But, for the most part right now, the market we're in, I pretty much try to stay away from short sales or distress sales. Usually there's plenty of comps, or if I do have to put one of these in my report, I will just explain, okay, I didn't give much weight for that one because, and then I'll explain the situation. So yeah, lately I've been seeing like, recently there was a comp I wanted to use, and it had been on and off the market for, like a year. And so I called the agent. I said, what's going on here? And not only had it was listed for sale, and it was also listed for rent. And, I called the agent, and he said, well, the seller can't make up his mind whether he wants to sell it or rent it. So it just wasn't a good comp, because obviously this guy was not a motivated seller. And, so his price was a little high, and there had been no price reductions. And I believe, that was a listing that I was thinking about using in the report. And so I threw it out because it just wasn't, we don't have a motivated seller here, so it's not making sense. I also, comps that maybe that are flips, we want to take a good look at those. The lenders do make us put in our reports any previous transfers of our comps within the past year. So if there was a previous sale, we need to explain, why did this sell for so much higher now, 3 months later, than it sold for before? And, a lot of times it's pretty easy to figure that out. It's because it was a total fixer. Somebody, bought it, fixed it up, and now they're reselling it. Sometimes it's not so obvious. Sometimes people just buy it, and then, they're trying to resell it for a higher price, and they didn't do any improvements to it. So we need to find out the story of that. And we may not be able to use that comp if it turns out to be something funny about it. So talking about same style homes, like I said, in some neighborhoods, it could be really hard to find something. You're not going to find, like, let's say I have a craftsman bungalow. I'm probably not going to be able to find all craftsman bungalows to include in my report. So I may have to use some Spanish, tutor, kind of mix it up a little bit. I'll definitely want to make sure I can get some craftsman bungalow comps. But if I have to throw in some of these other styles because maybe they have some other feature of the property that I'm appraising, then that's okay too. As long as it's comparable, as long as it's something that particular buyer would also consider. Okay. Okay, so we already talked about the square footage range that I pull when I'm doing my comp search. And then age. A lot of times I don't really fine tune. I don't really put the age range in there unless, like I was talking about before, let's say it's a newer property. I might just want to put in my search criteria what age homes, and just so I can just see where are the new homes at in this city. Are there any new homes that I can compare this to? So, I might have to really expound my boundaries and to find those. And, but sometimes you can't find enough that are similar in age. So you may have to use some older homes that are maybe remodeled. So maybe they're an older home, but they really have a similar effective age because they've been remodeled and they're practically like a new home. So for golf course homes, a lot of times I do have to go into another city because usually there's not enough turnover in on golf courses, properties that are on a golf course. A lot of times you're not going to find enough comps that are similar, and they could be there could be really extreme differences in sizes of the homes that are on the golf courses. It can be really difficult when you have a situation like that that's beachfront or a golf course. And so in those cases, we may have to go to another city or another neighborhood and try to find another golf course home that would be comparable. So I was talking about earlier about how sometimes I have to use comps. I've gone back as far as 3 years. So we have to figure out, has the market increased? Has it decreased since then? And so how I do this, and this is available to you guys too, it's a tool in the MLS. You just go into, it's called Info Sparks Market Statistics. And it's really cool because you can go you can go back as far as data exists to find out what the prices have been doing during that time period. And you can see them going up and down and up and down. So like here, for instance, if you do the bar chart, this will only, you can only pull data that goes back 3 years if you want to use this bar chart. And I can't really even see this on my screen. So I'm not exactly sure. I think I have 2 different neighborhoods, maybe. I think I was comparing 2 different neighborhoods. So that might be something you could use. Let's say you have a borrower that, you know, they want to be in a certain neighborhood, but maybe there is a comparable neighborhood somewhere else that they might consider, or is maybe more in their price range, and maybe they can find what they're looking for there, and maybe they're, you know, they might be willing to compromise. And so you can compare the 2 different neighborhoods and see, like, look, this neighborhood's more affordable, and you'll be able to get, you know, more of what you want if you go into this neighborhood. And so this one I love, because on this one, you can go back as far as the data exists, and you can even pinpoint, I don't know if you guys can see that, it's kind of small, but let's say I'm using a comp, let's say I'm appraising on this date right here. Okay, but I have a comp that's sold on this date. So look how much higher the values were then. And it will actually tell you, I don't know if that's the median price or the average price. I usually try to use the median price. And so what I can do is do the math from there and figure out, okay, what, you know, the median price was, I don't know what it says on there. What does it say? $799? No, $478. No, that's the entire MLS. So in this neighborhood, the price was $739. And over here, looks like it was in the mid 6s. I think the math is on the next page. Let's see here. This was an example of a golf course home that I was trying to show that I may have to, like I was, if I have one in Long Beach, I may have to go to Lakewood, a Lakewood golf course. They do sell for completely different prices though. So I try not to, I typically will not use comps in Lakewood. Like I won't typically, the golf course ones compare Long Beach to Lakewood, because there is a big difference in prices sometimes. But sometimes you have to, you know, that's all there is. And that's what you know, you have to try to figure out what the difference is in how much more do people pay in a neighborhood, this neighborhood as opposed to this neighborhood, and maybe do an adjustment because the one neighborhood's more desirable and typically go for more. So here's the math that I was talking about. So let's say I'm using a comp that was the average sales price in 2016 was $981, and the average price in 2017 is $1,171,000. Okay, when I do the math, to me it looks like there's been a 16% increase for the year, or 1.33% per month. But when I look at the individual, it's really important to look at the individual sales that make up that that search that you did, because there might be something unusual that you need to throw out that doesn't make any sense. It's an outlier. So like in this case, let's see, it looks like the average price went from 2016 to 2017. That's a huge jump, 981 to 1171. And then, then if you look at 2018, it went from 1,171,000 to 1,711,000. Okay, so that's a huge jump in a year. So maybe there's something we need to look at. Maybe there's a comp in there that we need to throw out that just was way bigger than anything else out there. Or, you know, let's say ours was not on a golf course and that one was on a golf course, so it sold for so much more. So we might want to throw it out. So you know, it's important to not just look at, you know, when you pull the data, just look at the averages, and you have to know what's making up these, you know, what is in these comps that you just pulled. let me see, because right here it says, yeah, so there was 7 comps in here, 4 comps in this search, and 3 comps in this search. Okay, so that's not a lot of comps, and it's because I think I was looking for the ones that were on the golf course. So that's why there's such limited comps that came up for these. Okay, so we already talked about active listings and pending sales, how those are really important. The lenders really want to see what's going on right now in the market. And that's going to tell them that right there. So, yeah, I think we already pretty much went over that. And another thing we need to look at too is the principle of substitution. So let's say you have 2 properties right next door to each other. One is extensively remodeled and the other one doesn't have any improvements. Okay, somebody may want to buy the one with no improvements because they can get it cheaper and they can do all the improvements the way they want to do it. So that's something that we have to consider, that you know, a lot of times people think that the amount of money they put into a property to improve it is how much the value should go up. And that's not the case. The cost of the improvements does not equal the value. So another thing too, I wanted to point out is some appraisal management companies require us to put in our report what our search criteria for our comps was, so that they can see what did we, what kind of comps did we even pull? And sometimes, or what I was going to say is they don't, one of the criteria they do not want us to use is searching by price. Okay, that's irrelevant because we're supposed to be an independent third party and, and be impartial. So the price isn't even something that we would put in our search range. And they would not want to see that in our search criteria if we were, if they were one of the appraisal management companies that asks for that. So, but, there are times when you may want to look at it. Like, let's say I have a sale and it's sold way above everything else. And I don't have any comps. I can't find any comps. I might want to see, well, what is selling for this price? And so I might look at price just for that to see, if the homes that are priced in this range are like, they're all like 1,000 square feet bigger or something, then something isn't right. Maybe this house isn't worth what it sold for. So, and then I know you guys probably pull, based on what the people can afford and all that too. And so that would be a reason why you would be searching in a certain price range. But sometimes people list the homes for so low because they're trying to get that multiple offer frenzy going. And so sometimes the list price doesn't really, I might miss something if I search by prices. So, there's really never any perfect comps unless you've got like a model match that's exactly the same condition, same location, all that. It's really unusual for that to happen. We just definitely want to make sure we use the most recent closed sales. We want to, the less adjustments we have to make, the better, because that's indicating that it's more similar to our property. If we don't have to make a lot of adjustments, then that's an indication that it's very similar property. If we've got them, but there's some properties that there just isn't anything like them. We have a lot of that in Long Beach. There's a lot of neighborhoods where the homes are just, they vary in size and quality and size of lots so significantly that there's just going to be a lot of adjustments on every appraisal we do in some neighborhoods. there's a lot of, sometimes values can be really different between different appraisers too, because there are a lot of things like views that people have different opinions on. So we really, when it comes to views, we really need to make sure we find comps with similar views, or go back in time and try to find, back in time, for instance, what was a similar home with this type of view selling for versus one that was very similar to it without a view. What percentage higher was it? That could maybe help us figure out what percentage higher we should price the home at. What are buyers willing to pay for that view? So there's a lot of ways we can look at old data and try to figure out. We basically do a paired sales analysis. Is what we're supposed to be doing as appraisers. So we're trying to compare, ideally we would want two exact same homes. And let's say one has a view and one doesn't, and then that's going to be your view adjustment, right? But a lot of times there's so many other differences in the two homes. So it's can be very difficult to, pinpoint exactly how much do we adjust for the view, how much do we adjust for these other things. So, basically I interview agents and, find out more about the views, because sometimes you can't tell what the view is either by the MLS photos. So you sometimes need to get a little more information about those views to really, make a good judgment call on that. Okay, so we've already gone over a lot of this stuff here, but I did want to point out that pools and green improvements like solar, people don't typically get their full return in the resale market for those improvements. And that's called functional obsolescence. So for instance, it could cost you $85,000 to build a pool, let's say, but the appraiser may only give you $10,000 in value. And so some people are like shocked when they see that kind of stuff. But it could go either way too. Like there are some neighborhoods where everyone has a pool, and if you don't have a pool, that could be a negative. Okay, or you could be in let's say you're in a lower income area, you have a pool, no one else does, because nobody wants to pay the cost of maintaining that pool. Then that might be, we might not get very much value for that pool because it's not a feature that's in demand in that neighborhood. Now, as far as the solar, we have like software that we use to come up with the value of those. So we need to get a lot of details about the solar system in order to figure out the value of that. So also we need to find out if the solar is owned or if it's leased. If it's leased, we can't give value to it. And also now Fannie Mae just changed it to where we can't give value if let's say they took a loan out to get the solar and they still are making the loan payments. We can't give value. They have to own it free and clear for us to give it value. So there's a lot of details I need to know about the solar in order to give them value. I need to know how many panels. I need to know, the brand name of the solar. How many kilowatts of does it produce? How old is the solar system? What is the let's see, what do you call it? Oh shoot, I can't think. I'm at a loss for words right now. What is basically the effective age of the solar system? Because a lot of them, they're really only good for about 20 years. After 20 years, they really start degrading, or over time, from the start, they will start degrading. They will start producing less and less over time. So they're going to be worth less as time goes on. So, and just so that there's no confusion of how we make our comp adjustments, if something is superior to the subject, then I'm going to subtract. Like, let's say I'm saying, okay, My subject doesn't have a view, and this other comp has a view. And so I'm going to take off 10,000 because that's what the market is showing me that view is worth. So I'm going to subtract that from what that comparable sold for. And that gives me an idea of what the subject should be valued at. Okay, and then it's the reverse if it's an inferior, if the comp is inferior to the subject. And sometimes when I review other appraisers, we've all made this mistake, I'm sure, but sometimes appraisers will adjust the wrong way. And so that's something I look for when I get calls from agents that say that, they got a bad appraisal, and, I take a look and it's like, I look for red flags like that might have made a difference in the value if they would have, I just look for errors like that. And then also their comp selection. Sometimes it's just not the best comp selection. They're using old comps when there was plenty of new ones that they could have used. I see that a lot. And right now also appraisers are being, we're seeing in there's Facebook groups for appraisers. And there's a lot of appraisers that are saying that they are not making positive time adjustments right now because they don't want to contribute to the overvaluing of properties. So, that's too bad that there are appraisers doing that because, if there's support that the market is increasing in value, then we should be making positive time adjustments. As long as we have support for it, there's nothing wrong with that. So unfortunately, I have been getting a lot of calls from agents saying that, on purchases, the appraised value has been coming in lower than the sales price. And in one case, it was like the appraiser purposely used older sales to bring it in lower, and even made some kind of snide comment to her at the property about, how the prices was just going up too high and he wasn't going to contribute to that, or I don't know, that whatever it is, like he just gave her the impression that he didn't want to participate in that, and he wasn't really willing to work as a team on it, it sounded like. So and there are, if you come across a difficult appraiser like that, I would suggest you find out as much of the appraiser you can before he comes out and does the inspection, and see if there's any way that you can maybe get another appraiser. Because if he's got a bad attitude right from the get-go like that, and isn't willing to look at comps that you've picked out when you know that they are really good comps, then, there's justification for, or if let's say the appraiser is not from the local area, or they don't specialize in that type of property. They typically do, like, for instance, like in Orange County, there's a lot of like cookie cutter tract homes. So an Orange County appraiser coming here where we have such unique and eclectic neighborhoods, they may not be familiar with, these differences that we have here. It can be much more difficult to appraise in this area than if you're doing tract homes. Okay, so I'm done now with the presentation. If you guys have any questions, let me know. And then again, I just wanted to share with you that Facebook group I created for agents, Appraisal Answers for Real Estate Agents. So if you don't already, if you haven't already joined that, make sure you join. And I will have to let you in, once you request to join, then I'll let you in. And I've got all kinds of information in there, like how to challenge a core appraisal, different, I get asked to speak at a lot of different, like the Big Spino's broker preview tour. They had me speak recently about, they'll have me speak about different topics. And so sometimes I will post the conversation on this in this group, so that you guys, if you couldn't make the meeting, you can see, still get the information. So because they've had me talk about different things, like they've had me do this CMA class before. I've talked about ADUs before. because there's like so much to talk about just about ADUs. And trying to think of what was the recent one they had me do. Oh yeah, it was about for appraisals. I just recently, and I believe I might have, no, I haven't shared that one yet. They haven't given me the recording of that one yet, but that one had a lot of good information about, challenging a poor appraisal and how to do a rebuttal letter and all that, and how to just avoid getting a bad appraisal, preventing it from happening in the first place, so you don't even have to go down that road. So anyways, I'm gonna open it up to questions then.
Yes, I have a question. Oh,
Okay. Who's talking?
oh, I heard like two people are talking same time. Sorry.
Oh,
I have a
I just didn't know that. Oh, okay, it's you, it's Yona. Okay.
Yona, yes.
Okay.
I have
All
a
right.
quick question. So let's say that when we were doing comp, we found like 3 homes. And then do you like add up all this like home price, like 3 home price divided by like number of home to get the comp?
No.
That's
If
wrong.
it was that easy, I wish it was that easy. There wouldn't be appraisers if it was that easy to value a home by just, coming with the average. But it is another way to look at, you can do things like that just to look at, what is the average, or, there's nothing wrong with, calculating different things like that. But we can't just base our value on averages or anything like that.
Got it.
Yeah, because it doesn't take into consideration the extreme differences that, most properties have in condition and, size and bedroom and bath count and locations and all that. So.
Got it. Thank you.
And also you're going to want to put more